Trump's trade war with Canada is crumbling, and his latest desperate move shows just how badly his tariff strategy has backfired. While the world watches Trump's economic threats spiral out of control, Canada's Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc just delivered a reality check that should have Trump scrambling. Speaking to Senate committees this week, LeBlanc made it crystal clear: Canada isn't backing down, negotiations aren't at a dead end, and Trump's bullying tactics are failing spectacularly. But to understand why this matters so much, we need to rewind to where this trade war disaster really began. In February 2025, Trump launched what he called his America First trade policy, slapping punitive tariffs on Canada and Mexico under the pretense of stopping fentanyl trafficking. The irony? Canada accounts for just 1% of U.S. fentanyl imports. But Trump didn't care about facts. He cared about flexing his economic muscle. The real motivation became clear when Trump set an August 1st deadline, demanding Canada capitulate or face even higher tariffs. He wanted a quick victory, a photo op, something to show his base that he could bend America's closest ally to his will.
You could almost feel this coming. If you look at the arc of the last few days, these sort of random tariff announcements with no detail, they don't seem to make any sense. In part, they affect Canada, but many other countries. And, standing before all these military leaders, this grand spectacle that looks like something of a sort of tin pot dictator show, you can tell the president wants to boast about his lacking war record. He wants to boast about territorial expansion. So, of course, the 51st state idea comes up. And sometimes you have to wonder if Donald Trump wants to be president of the United States in 2025 or 1825, because between tariffs and territorial expansion, these sound like the agenda of a president from the 19th century.
What's particularly revealing is how Trump uses these provocative statements as deliberate distractions. When facing domestic political problems, including looming government shutdowns and personal scandals, he throws what analysts call chum in the water, first with random tariff threats, then with outrageous talk of Canada becoming the 51st state. It's his standard playbook when dealing with political difficulties, comparing his rhetoric about territorial expansion to that of a tin pot dictator from the 19th century. What happened next must have left Trump fuming. Instead of rolling over, Canada stood firm. Prime Minister Mark Carney refused to accept what he called a bad deal. And when August 1st came and went, Trump was forced to raise tariffs from 25 to 35%, a move that screamed desperation rather than strength. But here's where Trump's strategy completely imploded. By exempting goods that comply with the Canada-US-Mexico agreement from these punitive tariffs, Trump inadvertently gave Canada a massive advantage. Canadian companies quickly adapted, with 90% of exports now accessing the U.S. market under CUSMA rules by April 2025, compared to just 38% in 2024. Trump's tariffs were supposed to hurt Canada. Instead, they forced Canadian businesses to become more efficient and competitive. The numbers tell the story of Trump's failure. Despite all his bluster about trade wars being easy to win, American businesses are the ones paying the price. Companies like Ford Motors, which relies heavily on Canadian aluminum and materials for their popular F-150 trucks, are seeing their profit margins shrink as they're forced to pay higher prices for essential Canadian products. Quebec alone supplies 65% of America's aluminum imports, making these tariffs a self-inflicted wound on American manufacturing. And it gets worse for Trump. American senators, governors, business leaders, and union representatives are all lobbying the White House to end this trade war. They're seeing firsthand how Trump's economic nationalism is actually weakening American competitiveness and driving up costs for consumers. The pressure is so intense that even Trump's own advisors are reportedly concerned about the long-term damage. Republican governors privately disagree with Trump but are too scared to speak out publicly.
Which we have to a tune of $1.2 billion, and that's the last number they gave me. It's 1,800,000 person hours that you can reallocate somewhere else. So we got to focus on what we can do and stop worrying about that guy south of the border. And we have great friends and great allies. I can tell you over and over again, when I speak to Republican governors, they do not agree with them. They're too scared to go out there and say anything. Isn't that it?
Ontario Premier Doug Ford captured the sentiment perfectly when he said they need to stop worrying about Trump and focus on what they can do. Ontario trades $61 billion with the U.S. annually, and despite the tensions, the province has attracted billion-dollar investments and cut $1.2 billion in red tape and regulations, positioning itself as a safe haven for business. Meanwhile, Canada has played this perfectly. Rather than panicking or offering desperate concessions, they've maintained a strategic approach that's paying dividends. LeBlanc's recent comments reveal a government that's confide, patient, and unwilling to be bullied into a bad deal. When he says conversations with American counterparts haven't hit a dead end, he's essentially calling Trump's bluff, and Trump knows it. The timing of LeBlanc's statements is particularly telling. With the CUSMA agreement coming up for review in 2026, Canada is positioning itself for long-term success rather than short-term appeasement. LeBlanc made it clear that Canada wants to resolve the tariff issue separately from the broader CUSMA renegotiation, effectively refusing to let Trump use the trade agreement as leverage. This strategic patience is driving Trump absolutely mad. He's used to quick deals, flashy announcements, and opponents who fold under pressure. But Canada isn't playing that game. Instead, they're letting Trump's own policies expose the weaknesses in his approach, while maintaining their economic sovereignty. Canada has successfully diversified its trade relationships while maintaining its crucial CUSMA exemptions.
At the UN General Assembly today is in fact about our economic resilience at home. Canada is doubling down on our multilateral relationships, not only in defense and security, but also in areas of the economy, such as the WTO. We are forging new economic partnerships with partners. I cited the trade agreement with Indonesia last week, Mexico, and further efforts in the EU, for example. So this is all hands on deck for Canada in terms of defense and security, in terms of economic resilience, as well as, of course, standing up for our core values.
Let me drill down on that, because that's sort of a focus of the speech that you delivered, right? Here are the three planks of our foreign policy,
Yes.
as we put it forth. Defense and security, as you mentioned, the second, economic resilience, and the third, core values. I want to pick up on the economic resilience part, because you gave some examples in Mexico, Indonesia, and in Europe. Your opposition at this moment.
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand has outlined Canada's comprehensive foreign policy approach, focused on defense and security, economic resilience, and core values. She emphasizes that Canada is the only G7 country with free trade agreements with all other G7 nations, and is actively working to leverage these relationships, including recent agreements with Indonesia, Mexico, and the EU. The evidence of Trump's desperation is everywhere. Just this week, his administration announced new Section 232 tariffs on lumber, kitchen cabinets, and furniture, claiming these products somehow threaten American national security. It's such an obviously ridiculous justification that even Trump's supporters are struggling to defend it. These aren't the actions of a confident leader. They're the flailing moves of someone whose strategy is falling apart.
Includes autos, where there's a mixed bag of tariffs. It includes copper, nickel, now pharma's coming, and the latest ones, which I think are outrageous, are on kitchen cabinets and furniture, on the guise that they represent a national security threat to the United States of America. So I think Prime Minister Carney should remind President Trump that you need to have a little balance here. Otherwise, you're going to be the laughingstock of the world with some of the tariffs that you're putting on. He also will remind President Trump that this is probably the largest, most complex trading relationship in the world. It's almost evenly balanced. In fact, it's heavily in the U.S. favor because they receive our raw materials, which they turn into jobs.
Former Canadian Ambassador Frank McKenna has called out the absurdity of these expanding tariffs beyond steel and aluminum to include autos, copper, nickel, pharmaceuticals, and even kitchen cabinets, all justified as national security threats. He suggests this makes the U.S. the laughingstock of the world. What makes this even more embarrassing Sing for Trump is how other countries have managed to cut deals while Canada holds firm. The European Union, Japan, and South Korea have all negotiated agreements that include baseline tariffs and various concessions. But Canada is essentially telling Trump that his demands aren't worth the paper they're written on. The domestic pressure on Trump is becoming unbearable. American businesses that depend on Canadian imports are lobbying furiously for relief. The integrated nature of the North American economy means that Trump's tariffs are essentially taxing American companies for the crime of being efficient. Canadian aluminum, lumber, energy, and agricultural products aren't luxury imports. They're essential components of American manufacturing and construction. LeBlanc's confidence isn't just political posturing, it's backed by economic reality. The result is a country that can weather Trump's tantrum while positioning itself for long-term success. Trump's biggest mistake was assuming Canada would fold like a house of cards. Instead, he's discovered that America's closest ally is also one of its most strategically sophisticated. By refusing to accept a baseline tariff, something LeBlanc explicitly ruled out, Canada has maintained its principles while exposing the emptiness of Trump's threats. The irony is delicious. Trump's trade war was supposed to demonstrate American strength and force concessions from trading partners. Instead, it's revealed the limits of economic coercion and the importance of strategic patience. Canada is essentially giving the world a masterclass in how to deal with Trump's bullying. Stay calm, stick to your principles, and let his own policies prove your point. But perhaps the most damaging aspect for Trump is how this trade war is affecting his domestic political standing. American farmers, manufacturers, and consumers are all feeling the pinch of higher prices and disrupted supply chains. The promised benefits of these tariffs haven't materialized, while the costs are becoming increasingly obvious to voters. LeBlanc's recent statements suggest that Canada is prepared for this standoff to continue well into 2026 and beyond. They're not desperate for a quick resolution, and they're certainly not willing to accept Trump's terms just to end the uncertainty. This patience is perhaps Canada's greatest weapon in this trade war. Every day that passes without a deal is another day that American businesses feel the pain of Trump's policies. Every quarterly earnings report that shows declining margins due to tariff costs is another reminder that Trump's economic nationalism is actually weakening American competitiveness. The pressure is building from every direction, and Trump is running out of options. As we look ahead to the formal CUSMA review process, Canada's position looks stronger than ever. They've weathered Trump's initial assault, adapted their export strategies, and maintained their economic sovereignty. Meanwhile, Trump is left explaining to American businesses why they should continue paying higher costs for essential Canadian products. The real test will come in the months ahead as this trade dispute intersects with broader North American economic integration. Canada's bet is that economic reality will eventually force Trump to back down from his most extreme positions. Given the mounting pressure from American businesses and the upcoming CUSMA review, that bet is looking increasingly smart. Trump's tariff war with Canada was supposed to be a quick victory that demonstrated American economic dominance. Instead, it's become a prolonged standoff that's exposing the limits of economic coercion and the resilience of Canada's trade strategy. LeBlanc's confident statements this week suggest that Canada is prepared to play this long game, and they're winning. For Trump, this represents a fundamental failure of his America First approach. Rather than bringing jobs back to America or forcing better deals, his tariffs have created uncertainty, increased costs, and strengthened Canada's resolve to diversify away from overdependence on the U.S. market. It's exactly the opposite of what Trump promised, and everyone knows it. As this trade war continues, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Canada's refusal to cave to Trump's demands isn't just about trade policy. It's about maintaining economic sovereignty in the face of unprecedented pressure. And so far, that strategy is working perfectly. Trump may have started this trade war, but Canada is showing the world how to end it on their own terms.